I have pretty vivid dreams, but I usually forget about them within a day or two. However, there is this one dream that I do remember, and I don't really know why. Maybe there's some kind of artistic merit, or there's something poignant about it. It goes like this. I'm watching the news on the TV, and there's been a giant sinkhole that just randomly appeared in the middle of a city. It's caused a lot of damage to the city's infrastructure. Roads are blocked, cars are backed up, there's traffic everywhere, there's been potential lives lost, it's just generally pretty horrible. I then change the channel, and suddenly I'm watching a movie. It's called The Billionaire, and it stars Lavelle Crawford, the actor for Huel from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. He's the billionaire, a rich corporate dude hanging out inside some kind of corporate skyscraper. He gets a phone call. He picks it up, and the caller says, "Every second that your phone is ringing, or someone is talking to you on the phone, you will lose $1. He hangs up the phone, shrugs it off, but he does check his bank account and notices that, hey, he did lose $5. And while investigating his bank account, his phone starts to ring again, and he sees that his bank account starts to drain again. So he blocks the caller, and then suddenly another call comes in. And in his other pocket, a second cell phone starts ringing. And he continues to try to block all these calls coming in, and more cell phones start showing up in his pockets. He hears ringing coming out of his briefcase, and he opens it, and there's tons of cell phones in there, and they're all ringing. All the while, his bank account is just depleting faster and faster. He hears phone calls coming in from different rooms and offices. All the cubicles have their little work telephone, and all of them are ringing. He's frantically running around trying to shut off all these phones. An elevator door opens and phones just start flooding out of the elevator. So many phones are ringing, and there's just absolutely no way he can hang them all up. And after a long, desperate struggle running around the corporate building, until suddenly, all the calls stop. There's a brief moment of silence, and he checks his bank account, and it now reads 0. Completely defeated, he makes his way to the top of the skyscraper and leaps. However, when he lands, it ends up creating a giant sinkhole in the middle of the city. The same one from the new segment at the beginning of the dream, bringing everything full circle. Aside from that one scene in Breaking Bad, I have no idea what inspired this dream, but if there are any film producers, or Lavelle Crawford, if you want to make this happen, let me know. I'm totally down. Anyways, we're playing ranked Pokemon Auto Chess. Nothing happens in the first 3 rounds. But our first carousel is Chansey, who sells eggs for 10 gold. I pretty much always take this offer. It's a big hit to your early game economy, but you're pretty much guaranteed a good late game unit. I'm pretty much okay with any hatch unit, except for maybe Axew, but even then, there's still some teams you can build around it. The hatch unit that I get in my egg is Rowlet, which I do think is one of the weaker hatch units, but it can definitely do a lot of damage with the right items, and it's got a lot of versatility with its 3 synergies, so we'll just set that egg aside for now, and try to figure out things as we go. Regardless, the first round of the game, I've got nothing going on apart from a Wonder Box. That, however, is not going to be enough to beat this fairy team with a Pikachu. For our first draft, I pick up Scraggy and a Magnet, which I think is the best item component for Rowlet. But I also find a third baby in Igglybuff in the shop. I've already got 2 benched. And since I've already lost the first round and my team is weak with nothing going on, I might as well run babies as a lost streak opener. There are a lot of grass hatch units, there's a second ghost hatch unit, so I could potentially get 2 really strong units for my late game team here. And to make my team as weak as possible, I'll sell everything else on my bench. So we're only running 3 out of 4 units, and this ends up working perfectly for me because I take on another baby player. They've got 4 units to my 3, so that's a very easy loss for me. And it's extra nice because I'm interrupting their loss streak as well as their baby streak. And to continue this good luck, I get an egg. This egg has Tepig, which is a pretty good unit, but it has 0 overlap with Rowlet, so it's going to be very unlikely that I'll be using both in my late game team. Regardless, we'll continue along with our 3 baby units. I throw my Wonder Box on Meryl. It's highly unlikely that my team will win versus any other team, since I am running 3 out of 4 units, but the Wonder Box could roll a lucky egg or an amulet coin, which could potentially increase my chances of getting an egg or some extra gold. It can also potentially save me some HP if Meryl's able to pick up a few kills. And yeah, with some nice spell casting items in Soul Dew and Mana Scarf, Meryl does successfully knock out a unit before I lose the round. We're slowly building up our economy alongside this loss streak. No luck in finding an egg this time, but that's to be expected. So let's continue along, losing another round with our baby team. We've got another draft, and I would like to get that Twisted Spoon, but I definitely don't want to add Tyrant to the game. So instead, I'll pick up Noivern alongside a Charcoal. I also have to start thinking about Gyarados, which my current team stands absolutely no chance against. I do, however, find Shroomish in my shop, which is a very strong early game unit. And I also pick up Sandygast, who has Ghost Synergy, which is very useful for Gyarados. I probably should have waited for the fight to start before picking up these units, because I end up queuing up against the player in last place who has a very weak unevolved water team, and their team is so weak that it actually loses to my baby team. And it's my mistake of picking up Shroomish as well as that Wonder Box that ends up winning me this round, but honestly, not a big deal because I can just switch over to trying to make a strong team now. And in the next round, which will be the Gyarados fight, not only does my Rowlet hatch, but I pick up a Torchic and a Machop from the shop. That's a pretty fun rhyme, Machop shop. But I can sell off my babies, and this lets me run a fighting team, as well as Ghost 2 synergy from the Rowlet and Sandygast, which is more than enough to beat Gyarados. But with the current Pokemon that I'm able to pick up, I'm considering running a team with Tepig over Rowlet, because I do have some really good components for a fighting team. Fighting teams work very well with tanky scaling items like Muscle Band, as well as healing or sustain items like Shell Bell. So overall, I'm definitely leaning more towards a late game team with Tepig over Rowlet, but who knows what's actually going to happen. For now, let's take down Gyarados. And in the unique carousel round, my shop gives me a bunch of ghost Pokemon, so now I'm like, maybe I do want to use Rowlet. Regardless, I end up going in a fighting portal, and that leads to a pretty tricky selection of Pokemon. Gimmighoul is a very strong ghost unit, and Ogerpon has both grass and fire, which can bridge the gap between Tepig and Rowlet, making a grass-fire team. But with a Lost Streak opener, I don't want to get too experimental, and Gimmighoul also requires some weak rounds in order to get it activated. I want immediate power with a strong fighting frontline, so I end up picking up Galarian Farfetch'd. He's just a decent frontline fighting unit. Not crazy amazing, but definitely strong enough to boost up my team for the mid-game. And with Tepig now hatched, we can start our mid-game with a fighting, fire-flying ghost team. We'll use it to take on this very annoying ghost team with a tanky Sableye. And honestly, Galarian Farfetch'd puts in a ton of work this fight, even through the ghost curses. It's really making great use of that Muscle Band, but in the end, it's definitely not enough to take down this ghost team alone. So that's going to be a loss as we move on to the next Pokemon and item draft. I've got a pretty interesting decision to make because I really do want that heart scale. As I've said before, fighting team's best friend is a Muscle Band, and I can also make a Fluffy Tail to help fight against that ghost team. But as a unit, Misdreavus can be very dangerous against these high defense teams like fighting, and knowing that there's a ghost player in this game, I don't want to add Misdreavus. Instead, I'm going to grab a Fossil Stone because I can make a Fire Stone with my Charcoal. I'm seeing the potential for getting Fire as a side synergy, which is a nice combo for fighting synergy as fighting lacks scaling damage, but the later stages of fire synergy increase attack on every hit. That's going to allow my units to get stronger as the fight goes on, which fighting units are normally not able to do. For now, let's throw that Firestone on the Rowlet, who may or may not be a temporary unit. It will hopefully be safely nestled in the back line, and be able to get a lot of attacks off, increasing its attack damage. In this next fight against a human team, my opponent evaporates my front line except for that Galarian Farfetch'd. Unfortunately, my opponent has that backline Regieleki who has 2 scaling items, so once it casts its ability, it's able to finish off my team. Alright, next carousel is Electivire, who sells artificial items. At the moment, I'm still locked in on fighting synergy, and I kind of make a mistake here. I end up grabbing an Electrizer, which is probably the best item for fighting synergy, but I accidentally neglect the Swift Wing, which is almost just as good, but the Swift Wing would have allowed me to hit Flying 4 synergy, and it would also give me more versatility, because my team isn't really concrete yet, but a lot of my current core units have Flying synergy. Regardless, just seeing that Swiftwing show up in this carousel is giving me some ideas. We'll see how all of that comes in play later on in this game. But for now, let's equip our Farfetch'd with that Electrizer, which increases its holder speed and allows its attacks to paralyze and burn PP. We'll continue along, taking on this Fairy team. And despite our opponent's team having a lot of evolutions, including a fully evolved Raichu, they don't have a lot of good items to back it up. Our fighting synergy ends up being super useful in preventing a lot of damage. Rowlet stays completely healthy that entire fight, and we end up actually winning. In the next round, I'm able to replace my Sandygast with a Fuecoco. That allows me to maintain my Ghost 2 synergy, but also brings me to Fire 4 synergy. So now my Fire Pokemon, including that Fire Rowlet, are going to start scaling up with their attacks. My next opponent has a very dangerous fighting team in terms of unit strength. They've got so many evolutions, including a fully evolved Infernape and fully evolved Poliwrath, but they don't have a Muscle Band like I do, and they also don't have Fire 4 synergy. My team's attacks are able to scale up, as well as deal true damage through burns and Galarian Farfetch'd's ability, and despite my team being much weaker on paper, I'm actually able to win relatively comfortably. Alright, next round, everyone who bought an egg has their hatch unit evolve. My Rowlet turns into a Dartrix, which is definitely going to be a nice damage boost. But it's also important to know that 3 other teams are going to have a similar power spike. For now, we'll take on Mewtwo and Mew as we've been pushing towards level 7, grab some nice item components in Twisted Spoon and Heart Scale. Also, my Tepig evolves into Pignite, yet another boost in my team's damage. I'm also able to get to level 7 here, and I throw in a temporary Zubat. With Zubat, I'm able to hit Flying 4 synergy, allowing my flying Pokemon to gain Protect when they run away, as well as Sound 2 synergy, which is just going to give some team-wide buffs every time my Fuecoco and Zubat cast their abilities. Not too significant, but obviously doesn't hurt. I also combine some of my components, making a Fluffy Tail for that pesky ghost player, as well as an upgrade which works really well with Fire synergy. We'll take on a Ground 6 team with a very high damage dealing Krokorok. Ground is the staple scaling synergy of this game, but my team is not only able to match, but outpace my opponent's scaling, utilizing my items, my fire synergy, and even sound synergy. Everything helps, and I'm able to outdamage my opponent and win this round. In the next round, nothing really happens, we're just pushing towards level 8 as my team is doing quite well now. We'll take on a monster rock fossil team with a fully evolved Aggron. Seems like so many players this game have fully evolved units, and even though my team does outdamage my opponents, I have a lot of weak unevolved Pokemon that Monster Synergy loves to feast on. There's some visual bugs here, but my opponent's Aggron pretty much one-shot all of my team with its ability. That's going to be a resounding loss on my end. But as we head into the next carousel, I pick up a Noibat from the shop. That's going to be an upgrade to Zubat, and it's also the 3 cost that I added to the game. And for the final component carousel, I'll pick up a Twisted Spoon. And this round, I just upgrade my bats, changing my Zoo to Annoy. Nothing else happens this round, so we'll just take on this artificial team. They've got a super early Porygon 2, and my team, which has very few evolutions, is just going to get stomped by that late game monstrosity. And with that loss, my health is starting to look very low, so it's time to start stabilizing. I dump money into experience points until I hit level 8, and it's also time to start rolling down. I pick up a strong frontline fighting unit in Jangmo-O, and I'm also able to evolve my Torchic into Combuskin. And we're approaching the late game, but my team still doesn't really have a cohesive identity yet. I've got a good amount of fighting units, some flying units, some fire units, but I'm still trying to figure out which direction to commit to. At the end of the round, I'm able to pick up a very strong late game unit in Fletchinder, and I'll throw it in there last second as we take on this Ghost team. And even though this Ghost team is quite strong, they are lacking burst damage to take down my fighting units. I'm also very happy to have invested in a Fluffy Tail on my Pignite, who's also scaling up with its fire synergy and upgrade. And that last second pickup in Fletchinder is also helping out a lot. With that, I'm able to win this round relatively comfortably. And as we move on to the PvE round versus Lugia and Ho-Oh, I'm able to evolve myself a Noivern, as well as my Dartrix evolving into Decidueye. I'm still really trying to figure out my team, which direction I want to take it, whether it's fire, fighting, or flying, or just trying to figure out how to maximize all 3 synergies. My team also does have 2 dragons, and if I am able to find a 3rd dragon, for example this Goomy that I just picked up, I can activate Dragon 3 synergy, which is going to result in even more synergy combos to play around with. But for now, let's just take on Lugia and Ho-Oh and see what legendary we can pick up from the Portal Carousel. My final item component is going to be Heart Scale, which means my final item is Lucky Egg, not bad. And I think in the late game, of the 3 synergies I'm running, Flying is the strongest. However, there's only one flying portal and it gets claimed pretty quickly, so I'll just hop in this fighting portal and hope for the best. And ultimately, I get a pretty great choice in Galarian Zapdos. It's a strong frontline fighting flying synergy Pokemon, which overlaps perfectly with my confused team. Since I can't figure out whether to pursue fighting or flying, why not pursue both with the Zapdos? I should also mention that my Pignite evolved into Emboar this round, and now I've got a lot of units that are all contributing very valuable synergies for my team, and it's kind of a puzzle to figure out what's the best possible lineup to use. And on top of trying to balance all these synergy numbers, I feel like I have to use both Emboar and Decidueye for their sheer unit strength. After playing around with my team for a really long time, I realized there's no way to hit Flying 8, at least not without getting rid of my Emboar, who is probably my second most useful unit at this point. Hitting Flying 8 would be a huge power spike, but definitely don't want to do that at the expense of losing my Emboar. And as we get into our next fight against this electric team, I can see that if I am able to get to level 9 and throw in this Dratini, I will be able to get up to Flying 8 synergy as well as Fighting 6. Thanks to having Dragon 3 synergy activated, getting to level 9 is my way to victory this game. The problem is that I've already destroyed my economy and I need 72 experience to get to level 9. I also only have 32 HP, which is pretty much just 1 or 2 losses. So yeah, if I do decide to try to go for level 9, these next few rounds are going to determine the results of the game. And yeah, during this preparation phase, I'm really trying to figure out if there's a way to get to flying 8. Again, it is possible, but that would imply getting rid of my Embor, who is a very important unit to my team. And with 8 players still left in the game, we're just going to have to pray that we're able to survive until we get to level 9. We'll start things off taking on the fairy team. Once again, their low damage dealing fairy units are being damage checked by my tanky fighting units. They are dealing a lot of true damage thanks to their steel synergy, but thankfully it's still not enough to shred through my team. I'm noticing in the replay that because my opponent's attacks are dealing 3 different types of damage, physical, special, and true damage, those attacks were applying 3 stacks onto the muscle band that my Farfetch'd is carrying, and with the physical and special damage being reduced by fighting synergy, that muscle band just stacked up super quickly that fight. Anyways, during this next item carousel, I should pick up the flame orb and throw that onto my Embor, but honestly, I am wrongfully blind to that item sometimes. Instead, I'll pick up a cleanse tag, which is going to give shielding to 3 units, as well as a temporary rune protect. Still a very useful item, but I think it was the wrong choice here. I throw that cleanse tag onto my backline Fletchinder to splash on that rune protect and shielding onto my Decidui, and I also transfer my Electrolyzer onto my Embor, since I do want that Embor to be attacking as often as possible in order to stack up its upgrade and fire synergy boosts. We'll keep greedily sitting with our money, trying to build back our economy and hit level 9, but we're still quite a ways away, and it's very possible to be knocked out before top 4. I can still afford to lose a round or 2, but I'm also very much at risk of being knocked out of the game. Here is a matchup against the fighting team with the fully evolved Infernape and Poliwrath. This time they've also added a fully evolved Delphox into the mix, but unfortunately that's not going to do much for them. It's a long drawn out fight where Pokemon are being knocked out left and right. My Decidui is sitting safely in the back, just throwing attack after attack. Fighting and flying is proving to be a very annoying combination of synergies for my opponent's teams to deal with, just constantly soaking up so much damage as well as flying away and gaining protect. It's exactly what my backline Decidui needs, and we'll continue along, getting closer and closer to level 9 by the second. Because I am still saving towards that goal, I don't do anything this round, and we're taking on a monster ground team. Let's see if we can once again outscale them. Early into the fight, it's looking like a yes with my opponent's team getting paralyzed. My opponent's Crocodile is my biggest threat, and it's kind of stuck behind a smoke cloud, but as soon as it leaps out and hunts down my Decidui, it's able to get a ton of monster stacks and heal back up, and suddenly it's able to chomp down every one of my units. It's turning into a very big boy, and that's going to be a pretty unfortunate loss for me there. At 18 health, a bad loss could definitely knock me out of the game, but we are at a non-player round here, so a tiny bit of breathing room. Again, we're just saving and holding money, so let's just take down the birds and grab myself a Shell Bell. The one thing my fighting team has been lacking is healing, so that's going to be a nice addition to my Embor. And because of that, the Electrolyzer is going to move back onto my Galarian Farfetch'd. And quick maths right here, I need 58, technically 60 because of how the numbers work out. But yeah, 60 money to get to level 9. And I obviously can't sell my Dratini because that would be my 9th unit. So I'm basically 5 gold short of hitting level 9 right now. I'm also potentially 1 loss away from losing, but instead of rolling down and maximizing my chances of staying alive, I decide to risk it all in this next match, which very well could be my last. My opponent has a very strong Cinderace, but very few synergies to help support it. See, unlike me where I've actually built teams around my hatch units. So that's going to be a win for me, and my risk has paid off. I have survived to level 9. I can now dump all of my money into experience points, and look at this beautiful jump in synergies. Flying 8 activated, Fighting 6 activated, all because of a tiny little Dratini, who has actually evolved into Dragonair now. What a beautiful, never before seen team. Pretty proud of this Master Chef cook. But we still have a game to win here, so let's take on our next opponent. It's going to be the Ghost team, but we've got lots of sources of Rune Protect, including that permanent Fluffy Tail. Unfortunately, that Ghost Curse does start targeting down our Decidui, but it really doesn't matter because my front line is still really tanky, and my flying units are constantly taking off to the skies and dealing tons of damage with that Flying 8 synergy. We are now in the top 3 of the game and tied for first place. We've got another item carousel here, and after my opponents pick their items, I'm left with a pretty poor choice of items. Once again, I think Flame Orb is likely the best item, but I'm just allergic to burning myself, so I'll just pick up a Firestone instead. I'll be able to splash Fire Synergy onto another Pokemon. That's going to go on my Galarian Farfetch'd, who can generate a lot of speed thanks to that Muscle Band. We'll take on our next opponent, the Fairy Steel team. We haven't struggled with this team too much in the past, but they definitely have gotten a lot stronger. But so have I, with my dragons and birds taking off into the skies. Their backline is quickly evaporated, and some more dive bombs and attacks take down my opponent's Arceus. And the other player in this game is also taken out, presumably by this fairy player's ghost. And that's the end of the game. I gotta say, this is one of the coolest teams that I've ever built, and the path getting there was very interesting. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next game.